This side of time. Welcome to history, politics, and power. I am Edmond Obilo. The program is State Affairs. Akugo is made for rain. The day she was born, her mother ran mad and wandered away from the land. They say she went back to the gods. The child she left behind was brought up by the innocent old woman living in the hut by the stream. It is Akugo that told me to tell the people to prepare for that I should take the message to Umumiri using a new gong from the gods. I must find the gong in the market before the coming of rain. And the blind boy asked me to close my eyes to see his heart. But he left for me a gift of a silver gong. It is the gong I am. It's rain. It's rain. It's rain. And our farm will be green again. Wake up to time. Wake up to history. And wake up to politics and power. In telling the history of events and places, I believe in the powers of my that the dreams of the night will bet a great future. Though times might be hard in many African, nothing will stop it. The African is rising. And the Africa I see, it is not the Africa that want to dominate the rest of the world. It is the Africa that will cooperate with the rest of the world to bring the best to humanity. That is why is it here already? Or the Renaissance has come and gone? Don't forget, the focus of this edition of the program is Kwame. He towered above his contemporaries with an exuberant personality for the speedy and at Ghana's independence in 1957 explains his vision of Africa. Nkrumah is from the events that defined Kwame Nkrumah. What lessons are we to learn from the flaws of Kwame Nkrumah? I will catch you interact. It's a radio gets deeper. And this is radio in its own form. I am the radio man. And we are broadcasting from State Affairs Studio here in Ibadan, parts of the world. Many are in Ghana, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire. Let's come to the class to learn and unlearn, to teach and to be taught. As I approach to the state of Africa, and I titled this part of the program, A State of Our Own. I picked the title from a lecture delivered Professor of Comparative Own. In the lecture, he makes the point that the states in question, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, that the state in question has, in Nigeria, we still talk about the Igbo question, the Yoruba question, the Fulani question. Is the turn of the Yoruba. So how do you define cohesion in such an ethnic state? So in the lecture, Egosa Osagai examined second independence, federalism, to present the therapy. It was an inaugural lecture he delivered in his capacity as the visiting chair in Commonwealth Studies at the Chancellor Hall, University. He says the problems of war, terrorism, corruption, and poverty in Africa are functions of the contested ownership of the state. Who owns the state? And he feels that Tinubu, how do you know the owners of the state? In the lecture, Egosa Osagai makes the point, let me quote him. The state that was established to serve interests other than those of the people who were and essentially remain subjects rather than citizens. Are you a... I will pick your call once you call. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. All right. Once you call, make your point. If you can bring it closer to the table. Number yet? Okay, perhaps that caller. So I was talking about Egosa Osagai's lecture. And I'm happy to have you in this class of politics, history, and power. In this class, I expect to hear from you. I expect to read your comment. I need your feedback. Alex Ogwa is in class. All right, I can see Yemisi Shuinka here. Okoro Donchuku Izundu says dreams and ideology are reality that takes time to dose the step or cover. The son of Okonkwo Obi Okeke will become a president of Nigeria. All right. You can read to improve your knowledge of the subject. All right, let's pick the call. I hope the listener would hear me. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, radio, listening to your program and dreams are facts of tomorrow. One day, it must come to reality. Dreams must come to reality one day. Like I always tell my European in Nigeria, it might happen in my own time or in the next generation to come. A son of Okonkwo Obi that one day must become reality, no matter how difficult it is to achieve. Example of it, during the colonization of other nations or Africa, Britain never saw it coming to an end. But when the masses or the people decide to end it, no amount of boots like it is in the southeast. The military forces, like Zeke, who started like Zeke of Africa and ended up like Zeke of his community. Ojukwu will say
All right. All right. Thank
Nigeria
you.
will look for the Igbos or Igbos will look for Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, the clarity of the calls. I want to hear from you as I lead you into the lecture. Remember, the focus is Kwame Nkrumah, but I'm laying a background to the subject, and I'm using a Wusao Sagai's lecture to lay the background. And the title of the lecture is A State of Our Own. The lecture is in Africa. He argues that the decolonization process in Africa is incomplete, meaning that the state, an embodiment of colonization, must be liberated to meet the aspirations of indigenous peoples. So the state has not been liberated. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
I beg, don't be annoyed with me. I beg, just bear with me. This program of
The books, we'll put the numbers on the screen.
I couldn't in Ondo State.
Yes, we send books to different parts of Nigeria, so we'll send it to you.
Huh?
Send
I
us.
didn't hear you, sir.
Okay, don't worry, just keep listening. All right.
Look, I put down.
Send a WhatsApp number to the same studio numbers. Just send a WhatsApp message. Once you send a WhatsApp message, we will tell you the procedure. We send books to different parts of Nigeria, all parts of Nigeria. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Is that Edmondo Bilo?
Yes, Edmondo Bilo.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Radio Man.
Yes, good afternoon.
This is Omaba calling from Dagenham SS in the UK. Just me, I just want to chip in a little thing about Africa stuff you are doing, which is a good job anyway. But I was listening to you. You said we should give our honest opinion. Some of us, when we give our honest opinion, even on your pages on Saturdays, wherever, you choose to ignore our message because of choice of our own candidate in the last election. Really, you are doing a good job, Obi, Tinubu, Atiku. What I see that you more talk about even Tinubu, even for the election, even after the election, so we got issue in Nigeria. And for me, I supported Ashwaju. I just hope he's going to do good for us. But like you always say, I believe way to go. But for now, I want you to be really balance up your whatever you are talking about our leader. Now you are talking about Nkrumah today. He's a great leader. But we are hoping that we're going to talk about people that are going to have a vision for Obafemi Awolowo, which as of today in Nigeria, I don't think we got any of them. Even the people that portray themselves in the 2023 election that they are a savior. My own submission is I just want you to balance up your report and keep on doing the good. I don't want you to report to be one-sided because some of us feel that, you don't like way forward for Nigeria. So all of us can contribute our own part. Nobody like what's going on in Nigeria today. I don't like it. I have family back home. I know how much I say to them every time. You know what I'm saying? So just let us be positive about our country. So all of us can have a country called a home called Nigeria. Because there's a lot we stay in foreign land. Some of us want to come back home. And they want to come back home for a good country. So please, try to balance your report. Let's be a level program. Thank you for your time. We are listening to your program. We are on. We are still listening to you. Thank you for your time, Edmond.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for calling. Yes, let me hear from you. I need the feedback. You are the listener. I am the one talking. Thank you for that feedback. He called from the UK. So I'm talking about the state in Africa. Using Ewusao Sagai's lecture as the benchmark. Ewusao in the lectures is the struggle between the forces of colonialism and decolonization. He avers that second independence aims at decolonization. Second independence. Can we say that? The argument Usagai makes is that the 1960 independence of we did not really defeat the colonialists. We just moved from post-colonialism to neo-colonialism. So, because we got independence, yet we needed them to build cars for us. We needed to get the weapons from them. And we were still dependent. We are still dependent on them. So the second independence Usagai talks about in the lecture is similar to Kwame Nkrumah's notion of the development of Africa. We will come to that. That without the resolution of the legitimacy and ownership of the agency of the state becomes unachievable. Recently, that was last week, at the meeting of our National Council on Police, President Tinubu makes the point that the Nigerian police need reform, that it has colonial police, and the colonial police was created to protect the British leadership, to protect the leaders. The colonial brutal against the people. It protects the leaders, not really the people. And if you look from Africa, so that is what Usagai calls the colonial state. That there's a need for second independence. That means the state will now be for the people. It now becomes a state of our own. The people owns the country. Case a state for the people with universities, primary and secondary schools for the development of the human resources of the state. So do you agree with them as the most suitable of the state for inclusive, equitable, and accountable development? This is the state the people can call their own. If the state he is talking about in his lecture is equivalent to that state, so let's listen to the chart.
In states and renegotiating and rebargaining, it's not the most extreme form of, the kinds of, instances, organic communities that want to have a state that they can all have a sense of belonging in. And, sense of belonging doesn't mean having federal appointments. It doesn't mean having central government representation. It simply means let us have some portion of the resource. There is the rooibos tea. It's grown by the Khoisan peoples. And it comes from the rooibos plant, which is only found, in the Khoisan plant. And they have, a recipe, if you like, some technical ability to make this rooibos tea into a special form of herbal tea. And over the years, the Khoisan people, they are an absolute minority. They've been saying this is commercialization of rooibos tea, but they are saying we who own, the original. The government finally said, one, the intellectual property belongs to you, and two, now you are entitled to a percentage of every rooibos tea that is produced. That gives the Khoisan people. That's the kind of ownership that I'm talking about.
So what we have in the Niger Delta at the moment, the question of militancy is as a result of the...
In negotiating the terms of the Niger Delta people ought to have a say. And that say simply means you have a share in what that best you can offer to them. Now, we must learn from what the other countries in the world are doing and how they are able to secure some forms of accommodation, some forms of equity at Quebec in Canada. What is happening even to the minorities in China? What form of equitable accommodation within the state itself?
State Affairs with Edmond Nobilo is live.
Egusa Osagai. I had that interview with him in 20. So, having laid the background to the state, to Kwame Nkrumah, I will look at Kwame Nkrumah first, using the view of a critique, an intellectual critique. So here, I titled this Nkrumah, the Leninist Tsar. The Leninist Tsar. Who called him a Leninist? Ali Mazrui is one of Africa's intellectual greats. He began his academic career at the University of Makerere, Uganda, serving as a professor of political science and director of the Center for Afro-American and African Studies at the University of Michigan. Mazrui was a visiting scholar at some of the best universities in the world, including Stanford University, the University of Chicago, Oxford, and Harvard. In 2005, Mazrui was selected as the 73rd topmost intellectual in the world. He also made the list of the top 100 public intellectuals by Prospect Magazine of the UK and Foreign Policy Magazine of the United States. Kwame Nkrumah's ideas. So this formed the subject of his discussion on Africa's triple heritage. Mazrui defined triple heritage as one that is the triple heritage of Africa. In the article, Mazrui appreciates Nkrumah's vision of Africa and his ability to inspire Ghanaian nationalism. In the work, he views Nkrumah as a visionary leader who designed appropriate strategies to achieve his goals. However, that Nkrumah's failings came from the tragedy of his domestic excesses. Assessing Nkrumah's rise to power on grounds of his organizational skills and masses, having used the masses of Ghana to gain power on the platform of the Convention People's Party, harassing and persecuting his opponents. J.B. Dankwa, one of the Gold Coast Convention, UGCC, was imprisoned by Nkrumah. One of Nkrumah's flaws that Africans will not forget. Kwame Nkrumah was born. He liked Obafemi Awolowo, and Awolowo liked him. Nkrumah became the Prime Minister of Ghana in 1952. That's about 5 years before Ghana's independence. At independence in 19th position, after the constitutional amendment, Ghana started as a parliamentary system. Britain colonized Ghana the way it colonized Nigeria, and it started Nigeria as a parliamentary system. After 3 years of self-governance in Ghana, in 1960, there was constitutional reform, and Nkrumah moved from being prime minister to being the president of Ghana for the industrial takeoff of Ghana. As a traditional Pan-Africanist, he was overthrown in the military coup of 1966. The coup was sponsored by Western powers who were not comfortable with his rising power, especially in wanting to indigenous leadership. On his ouster, he lived the rest of his life in Guinea and died in 1972. What is clear is that Nkrumah towered above his contemporaries. With an exuberant personality and deep intellectual disposition, he led the struggle for the speedy and at Ghana's independence in 1957 explains his vision of Africa. We are going to play you that speech. In a moving oration, Nkrumah talked about reshaping the destiny of his country in the of the African continent. Nkrumah promised that Africans will sleep no more. He called it a new Africa, ready to fight its own battle, to prove that when given the chance, the African can create his own personality and identity. Can you see where Egosa Osagai's second independence call, delivering his speech on Independence Day in Ghana? Kwame Nkrumah, Independence Speech.
And my last warning to you is that you all should stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made it point that we are going to see that we create our way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes. How would you describe that speech? Electrifying. That's the way I would describe it. Electrifying. That was a 9 streaming. Get the studio number. I want to know, what do you think about that speech? Delivered in 1957. He calls it a new Africa. When given the chance, an identity. Let's play that again. Let's play it again.
how far my eye goes, I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are both. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made a point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
Edmondo Below is live.
Wow. You know, the independent leaders in most African countries were brilliant. Brilliant. Intellectuals, visionaries. Obafemi Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sekou Toure, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Patrice Lumumba of the Congo, Houphouët Boigny of Ivory Coast, now Côte d'Ivoire. Brilliant minds. Dayo Dada, his humility, selflessness, and does what the people want, not what they want. You know, sometimes a great leader don't do what the people want to. He does what the need. You know, he is visionary. He creates the society that will suit them. But there are general basic needs of every society. Food, housing, So I'm just breaking down your point, Dayo Dada. You said a leader comes for debate to win elections. You know, those things will continue to happen as long as the state in Africa led to the first coup in 1966 was election rigging in the Western region. That was a colonial hijacked. It is not used in the interest of the people. It is used in the interest of the hijackers. That is a colonial state. That is why Ehosa Osagai has called for second independence, saying self-determination is not necessarily independent. But that state in the interest of the people, that state where the oil in the Niger Delta, leaving your comment here. Amadi Lawson, I can see you. Thank you. Pedro Olayemi Babawale says it's good to be here, but on a lighter note, it's like, but I can see Omotayo Oluwarotimi Onobamiro is listening. Atlanta Onobamiro is now in the UK. Thank you for joining the broadcast. Kunle Adekbaju, Kunle, you're here? Kunle, it is Kunle that worked on the lights in this studio. He did a wonderful job. So if you are building a studio, if you have a church, and you want to design a lighting system, contact Kunle Adekbaju. He's a filmmaker. He's good with light. You can see what he did here. The magic of lightning. And Kunle is not that expensive. Dick Olayemi. Okay. And invite your friends to join. I'll be recommending 3 or 4 books to you in this class. And what I call the book of the day really is this one. You see it? The lovely book. If you read the compilations here, it will broaden your mind about Africa. The Pan-African Pantheon, prophets, poets, and philosophers. You want to read about the poets, philosophers, Mandela. I have a book for you. So this book makes a unique contribution to the literature on Pan-Africanism by providing lively biographical essays and prominent group of African, Caribbean, and African American scholars. Pan-Africanism. Get this book on udarabooks.com. You can also buy it through the WhatsApp numbers pinned to this broadcast. Classical work. Deep. I love the book. It is permanently in my office. Sometimes I just come read about 4 pages. And before you know it, I've finished reading the different copies. The chapters, rather. It's about 650 pages. You see the book? The Pan-African Pantheon. I recommend this book to you. A book of history, politics, and power. Talking about Pan-Africanism, this book covers well-known Pan-Africanists such as W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Ami Ashwood Garvey. It talks about C.L.A. Have you read Frantz Fanon? Anyway, we have created this studio to focus more on history. It is history, learning from the past. In this book, you will learn about Steve Biko's escape during apartheid. You learn about former South African President Thabo Mbeki. In this book, you read about popular figures identified with mainstream Pan-Africanism, such as Maya Angelou, Maria Mabah, Buchi Emecheta, Miriam Eric Walcott, V.Y. Mudibe. You read about Leopold Senghor, that brilliant philosopher that was the first leader of Senegal. He talked about negritude. You read about him here. In this book, you read about Malcolm X, Bob Marley, and is this book, The Pan-African Pantheon. The book also covers topics such as the history and pioneers of Pan-Africanism, the quest for reparations. It talks about politics, literature, and its musical activists. This is a comprehensive and diverse introductory reader for specialists and general readers alike. I recommend the book to you by Adekeye Adebajo. Will you get it? Get it on udarabooks.com and get it on the numbers pinned to this broadcast. Just send a WhatsApp message and we can send your book to you anywhere you live in Nigeria. We'll send your books to you. I'm talking about Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana on the show. Remember, as a man of great intelligence, Nkrumah saw the need for South-South cooperation, a platform for regional integration. He set a political agenda for Africa and wanted the black man by all means to chart his own course. He did not only say it, he pursued the idea with the view by Africans. Here, Nkrumah talks about colonialism and tribalism. I want you to listen attentively to this speech that Nkrumah delivered, where he talked about colonial.
And no one can alter the course of that destiny. It is the destiny of complete freedom for Africa. Achieve some measure of success in this struggle for human freedom and dignity. But we still have a great task ahead, that of the enemy. Who is the enemy? Which uses as its weapons colonialism and neocolonialism. Let us be very, very clear about this. Let us also not lose sight of the real objective, which is the liquidation and the political unification of Africa, our dear continent. Then we must ask, likely to put on. Modern imperialism arose when capitalism had achieved both industrial and financial monopoly, and the competition has advanced parts of the world. And Africa were divided up among them. Fellow freedom fighters and friends, African nationalist thinking has been adjusting to internationalism within the continent. The development process that must be seriously undermined by tribalism, which provides one of the happiest hunting grounds for the colonialists and new colonialists. Do all our valiant efforts to bring real independence to Africa. We all know the evils of colonialism, but there are some of us who do not appreciate the malevolent possibilities for infinite disruption. We know that the colonialists are past masters in the policy of divide and rule. The other. Soon, these superficial differences become exaggerated into serious political fight. You must guard against it. Guard against it by forging a common united front against the common enemy.
Into history. Made it clear. Look at Africa in 2023. The reason we are reflecting on the past. Are you learning? Are you unlearning? Is due to the mindset of me, myself, and I, of our so-called rulers. Let your comments come in. You can also call lines, hypocrites, falsehood propagandists, jokers that don't know about leadership. Dayo, calm down. I know. Thank you, Idris, for listening. That is why we created the studio, so that we'll create more time for intellectual discourse. And you know it's lacking in Africa that recreates a country. Yes, entertainment also makes the people happy. But it's in the deep discourse that we move from ideas to evolution, going down history lane. You know, we've been talking about the first military coup, the Civil War. We're not done with that subject. It's a constant subject. So that this generation, we understand what happened. You know, I still see sometimes in some writings and comments, the Igbo-Yoruba argument, you know. Some call themselves betrayers. No, that's not the perspective I hold. I'm a student of history. I study it keenly against any tribe in Nigeria. But I also understand that leaders have also created that distance among the Nigerian people. The reason walk the state, no doubt. Ben Respect is here. He says, the radio man, Leadership is all about, okay, I've read this. Leadership is all about selflessness. I agree with you. And being disciplined, yes. Ben says majority of our leaders are not disciplined. The citizens have taken, Ben, time is already telling. Omotayo Oluwarotimi Onobamirosa. Since all the independence of the African states, most of them have been stained by a lot of materialism. But Omotayo, we are also not looking for perfect men, because you might not find there's always that flaw. But they still have their flaws. So keep the messages coming as we reflect on Kwame Nkrumah in this class. In that last speech, he talked about colonialism and tribalism. Nkrumah calls for a united state of Africa, suggesting that Nigeria should provide the first head of state of that United States of Africa. Of the flaws of the organization was wanted a United States of Africa, Kenya. East Africa is beginning to be perfect. And when I see them, because in recent time, in my travels, I've been focusing on East Africa. It tells me that Africa is coming. While Nkrumah's main opponents were colonialists, but he found if Awolowo had become Nigeria's prime minister at independence, of Tafawa Balewa to work against him. That's a story for another time. To the decolonization of Africa, he was a radical. Why the Balewas were gradualists? Let's take it easy. Buoyed by the Soviet Union's resolution at the United Nations, called for the immediate decolonization of African states. The Nigeria-led Monrovia bloc championed a gradualist approach to African unity and decolonization. The gradualist approach also has its merit. They had their own argument that if we rush it, we might not be able to grow it. So as we learn, we decolonize. There are some merits in that argument. So the disagreement between Kwame Nkrumah's Casablanca bloc and Nigerian-led Monrovia bloc led to the formation of Dr. Teslim Elias of Nigeria and his team came up. Nkrumah wanted a united statement cause that transcends the division created by colonial powers. He wanted to bring down the borders, that they were colonial borders, that we don't need the borders. Can you see? Like from January, you're an African, you can walk in. Rwanda has announced you don't need a visa to come to Rwanda. Integration. That was what Nkrumah wanted long ago. That why do you create a Nigerian border? That the borders were created by the colonialists. Some parts of Benin Republic are Yoruba people, especially the Ogaden region. You have the Ogaden people of Somalia being part of Ethiopia. That led to the Ogaden War. That was the point Nkrumah was making. Let's listen to this speech.
Our greatest danger stems from disunity and the inability to see that the realization of our future progress and prosperity is inextricably bound up with the necessity to unify our policy and actions in connection with the continued struggle for independence and the greater task of economic and social reconstruction beyond it. We must therefore face the issue of African unity now, for only unity will make the artificial boundaries provide an effective remedy for border disputes and internecine troubles. In a united Africa, there could be no frontier claims between Ethiopia and Somalia, or between Zanzibar and Kenya, Guinea or Liberia, or between some of the leaders, it must be confessed, do not see the struggle of their brother Africans as part of their own struggle. Even if they did, they would not be free to express their solidarity. These rifts are consciously created by the imperialists between Africans, where they can, for those who fail to see how they are being used against Africa's best interests. Regrettably, those states include some who were among the freedom fighters, denied to those still struggling for freedom even their moral support. Here is a phenomenon against which all African freedom fighters must be on their guard and resist to the utmost. Even though I appreciate the difficulties facing us, I must admit, I find it strange to watch some of us returning willingly to the colonialist fold. This time, they don't even have to effort and sacrifice, and so many lives were given up to the achievement of independence in the first place, if it can only be so quickly and easily surrendered. Unhappily, not severed at the moment of independence, but remain to condition loyalties away from Africa towards the metropolis withdraws them. They are unable, it would appear, to accept the idea that Africans can see their salvation in coming together in association like the Franco-African community mooted recently at Bangui. Although there are many here who speak English, French, Spanish, or Africans fighting for Africa's independence, Africa's unity, Africa's future.
State Affairs with Edmond Bilo is live.
I recognized his flow that transformed their country. You need some level of toughness to transform a country. But toughness in the interest of the people, not brutal toughness. You know, have you read some of Nkrumah's books? I'm trying to get them for the store. They're mostly out of print. Think you should read. African, the Modern Imperative in Contemporary Africa, a Manifesto by Olufemi Taiwo. Hey, this is the book. Africa Must Be Modern. Read this book. You get it on Udara Book. You have on the way in Nigeria. We deliver books to any parts of Nigeria. Africa Must Be Modern. In this insightful, thought-provoking, controversial, and compromising manner, what he describes as Africa's hostility towards modernity and how it affects economic development and socio-political transformation. He says, meanwhile, there are no guarantees that what would come of the research would solve any practical problems. Indeed, it may be the case that the scientists of developing Africa. A good book to read, Africa Must Be Modern, by Professor Olufemi Taiwo. You'll get it on udarabooks.com. Yes, we'll be rounding off the discourse soon. Before that, one work that has the capacity to inspire. It's a big and heavy book, and it's a bit expensive though, but well printed. Yeah. It's entitled Mandela. The book is entitled Mandela. Big book. These are just our new collections. We've not even put it on the store yet. We'll put it on the store soon. But you can still buy it on the WhatsApp numbers. Big book. Inspiring book. They are tributes to our global icons. Motivational tributes. Historical tributes about him. You find them in this book. WhatsApp number. This is the third book I'm recommending to you. As we round off, it's important to say, Africa, to defend the continent and chart a development course that transcends the division created by colonial powers. Professor Kolawole Ogundowole has written about Nkrumah, of Kwame Nkrumah. Kolawole Ogundowole, a professor of African philosophy at the University of Lagos, now retired, speaks about Kwame Nkrumah. He opens our eyes to Nkrumah. In this book, you give a lot of credit to Kwame Nkrumah. But professors like Mazrui would say Nkrumah was perhaps a czar, a man who was carried away by self-importance. But Ogundowole here celebrates Nkrumah as that
Nkrumah was an enigma. In fact, I mentioned in this work, Nikolai Copernicus, the Polish, and the sun moving around it. That was the Ptolemy's theorization. And the whole world of religion, Catholicism, embraced that, and no one dare counter that view. With his telescope, then he observed that no, every other body seems to be standing still, but I'm moving. My telescope is moving. Oh, the earth moves around the sun. He was to be caught and killed. He ran away. But just who sought his head at that time when he came out with that new discovery, they had to exhume his body and give him a befitting burial 500 years after. And in fact, I mentioned it at the conference to celebrate Kwame Nkrumah's centenary birth. The entire AU and government of Ghana, I was invited to give a paper there. The third president of Senegal, Wadai, I mentioned that just like Copernicus, the discovery by Kwame Nkrumah of the need for continental governance. You understand me? So, imperialist view that Kwame Nkrumah was emperor or anything. Kwame Nkrumah was like, but at the same time, you won't take away from him that was a penetrating philosopher with penetrating mind, far beyond. In fact, he was seeing things about 50, 100 years ahead of his contemporaries.
His book, New Colony, that the struggle for freedom must begin with intellectualism.
Yes. Yes.
State Affairs with Edmond Bilo is live.
Discuss Kwame Nkrumah. Someday I would bring you the full interview. I had that interview with him about 5 years ago. If you're just joining, welcome to this class of Politics and Power. And we will appreciate if you shared this broadcast so that many would learn from it. during Nkrumah's time created serious division on the African continent. Nigeria used its size and influence to tow its gradualist approach, thereby stopping Nkrumah as the biggest factor on articulate. Many of them knew the road to African enlightenment and displayed this in their persuasive and visionary speeches. They were mostly intellectuals at their best. Talk of Julius Nyerere, Obafemi Awolowo, Leopold Senghor, and others. They were great minds. At this point, we call it a day on the program State Affairs. I am Edmond Obilo. Join us on Wednesday for another edition of the program. Thank you for being there.
In your millions. And my last warning to you is that you all should stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are not waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. And show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world. A minute ago, I made a point that we are going to say that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. We have done the battle, and we again. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
State Affairs with Edmond Obilo is live.
Welcome to this side of time. Welcome to history, politics, and power. I affirm will be green again. Akugo is made for rain. The day she was born, her mother ran mad and wandered away from the land.